2 y 13 auto. Screens bloom red across trading floors that never sleep. The yen spikes, then the yuan, then everything blurs into pure velocity. In New York, a backup generator hums as the lights flicker, like the building is breathing wrong. A siren starts somewhere distant, then another, then a chorus that doesn't match any drill anyone remembers. The first shock is not noise. It is the sudden absence of certainty. On a Bloomberg terminal, a single headline repeats with different words like a stutter: coordinated action, orderly adjustment, stability, pact. The language sounds gentle, diplomatic, even boring, but the numbers move like panicked animals, slamming into limits, leaping over them, refusing gravity. Somewhere in a glass office, a risk manager whispers, "This is the weekend deal," and nobody asks which weekend. At the Treasury Annex, fluorescent lights wash faces into gray. Phones ring and ring, and nobody answers with their names anymore. A junior analyst prints out a chart, and the ink looks too dark, like spilled blood. The room smells like burnt coffee and hot plastic. The air conditioning keeps running, still believing the grid is eternal. The catastrophe begins in silence. In the spaces between official statements, a private communique leaks in fragments, half confirmed, fully acted upon, 5 signatures, maybe 7, and one country that refuses to sign but still gets dragged. They call it a realignment, a reset, a corridor. The market hears only one word: devaluation. As the world holds its breath, where will you be when money stops behaving like money? Not when prices rise, but when price itself becomes untrustworthy. Not when a bank fails, but when every bank doubts every other bank's numbers. In that instant, the old world doesn't swap. A new, harder one begins. Phase I starts with the trigger that looks administrative. A coordinated currency intervention hits in layered waves, disguised as routine liquidity support. Central banks sell one reserve, buy another, then announce temporary measures with permanent consequences. A digital pulse follows, timed to the minute, slamming into FX swap lines and offshore funding markets. The system is designed to absorb shocks, but only the shocks it expects. A second trigger rides the first, like a parasite on a storm. Malware that has been sleeping inside financial message queues wakes up, not to steal money, but to scramble trust. Settlement confirmations arrive late, then duplicated, then Swift traffic doesn't stop. It becomes unreliable, and that is worse. Banks don't fear loss first. They fear not knowing what is true. Governments see it immediately, but they don't say it out loud. They call emergency meetings with names that sound like committees because panic needs polite clothing. Defense ministries monitor markets like battle maps because fuel contracts and missile components depend on trade finance. Intelligence agencies track capital flight the way they track troop movements. In the same hour, money becomes logistics, and logistics becomes survival. Civilians see none of it at first. They wake up, make coffee, scroll headlines, and feel only a vague tension in the wording. News anchors speak slower, like they're reading from a script that might change mid. A few people joke about another financial thing. A few remember 2008 and feel their stomach tighten. Most still believe the magic works, because it always has. Then the first bank app fails in a way that feels personal, not an outage message, but a spinning circle that never resolves. Password resets don't arrive. Customer support lines produce only busy signals and synthetic apologies. The public doesn't call it a currency war. They call it the system being down. Inside the government, the tone shifts from economic to kinetic. A national security advisor asks a simple question. If we can't settle energy payments, what happens to the carriers? A logistics general answers. Without drama, we start rationing mobility. A central banker uses a word nobody wants to hear. Controls. The room goes quiet because controls mean the border moves inward. A rumor spreads faster than any official bulletin. It says a new accord has been signed at a private resort, away from cameras, away from parliaments. It says the deal forces a rival's currency upward until exports choke and factories die. It says the same trick was used decades ago on a different island nation, and it worked too well. It says the weapon is not a missile. It is exchange rates. By midday, the first visible symptom appears in the least dramatic place. A gas station pump rejects a card, then rejects the next, then locks with a blinking error. The clerk shrugs, resets the terminal, and watches it fail again. A line of cars grows, engines idling, each driver staring at the dashboard as if it can explain. The smell of fuel hangs in the air like a promise that won't be honored. Phase 2 begins when payment rails fracture. ATMs don't empty because of cash shortages at first. They empty because people can still imagine cash as real. The machines spit bills in ragged bursts until they display temporarily unavailable. That phrase becomes the era's anthem, printed on screens, spoken by bots, felting bonies. The public learns the difference between unavailable and gone. Retailers try to keep the old rules alive with duct tape. Grocery chains switch to offline mode, then to cash only, then to exact change required. Registers can't verify balances, so clerks become judges, deciding what counts as payment. A man offers a gold ring for infant formula. A woman offers a box of antibiotics for gasoline. The economy doesn't collapse like a building. It collapses like a social agreement. Cell towers overload next, not because of cyber attack, but because everyone calls at once. Networks prioritize emergency channels, but everyone feels like an emergency. Texts delay, then arrive in bunches. Hours late, like messages from a different timeline. People begin driving to loved ones because digital reassurance fails. Roads clog with purposeful panic. In control rooms, engineers watch infrastructure dashboards turn into abstract art. Power demand spikes as people stay home, charge devices, run televisions for comfort. Utility companies can't hedge fuel costs because commodity markets seize. A regional grid operator loses visibility into 2 substations when a vendor VPN drops. They don't know if it's a glitch or intrusion, so they isolate it. Isolation spreads like infection. Ports become choke points of modern fragility. Containers stack higher. Cranes pause mid-motion, and ships drift offshore like patient predators. Letters of credit can't be confirmed, so cargo can't be released. Customs officers stare at paperwork that might be worthless in a new currency regime. A single delay becomes a cascade because just-in-time has no patience. A defense procurement officer discovers the nightmare hiding inside a spreadsheet. A missile guidance component is manufactured in 3 countries, paid in 2 currencies, insured in a third. The supplier refuses shipment without guaranteed settlement. The officer calls it an issue, but the general calls it capability loss. War readiness depends on invoices, and invoices now depend on trust. On television, leaders appear with force calm, hands placed carefully on lecterns. They say the financial system is resilient. They say deposits are safe. They say coordinated measures are underway. Behind them, an aide holds a folder labeled Emergency Liquidity Facility, as if naming it makes it real. The public watches the leader's eyes, not the words. Somewhere in a residential neighborhood, a supermarket manager locks the doors early. It isn't empty shelves yet. Not truly. It's the look in the first shopper's face, the one who grabs 10 cans instead of 2. Fear is contagious because it is rational under uncertainty. Shelves don't empty because of shortages. They empty because of prediction. A police dispatcher reports an uptick in nonviolent disputes. People arguing over parking, over lines, over the last bag of rice. The dispatcher notes the tone is different, sharper, less embarrassed. Civility is a luxury product and its supply chain has broken. Officers are told to de-escalate, but they are also told to conserve fuel. The first citywide blackout isn't caused by bombs. It's caused by a grid that can't balance because fuel deliveries miss schedules and maintenance crews can't access parts. A gas turbine trips, then a cyclone, then frequency dips below tolerance. Protective relays do exactly what they were built to do. They save equipment by sacrificing the lights. When the power goes, the sound changes. Refrigerators stop their hum. Traffic lights die and distant highways become dark rivers of stalled steel. Apartment buildings turn into vertical caves. Stairwells lit by phone screens and cheap flashlights. The air smells of candles and panic sweat. The night suddenly feels older than the nation. In the dark, radios matter again. Shortwave crackles with voices that sound calm only because they are practiced. Amateur operators relay local conditions, water pressure, hospital status. Official broadcasts repeat canned messages, delayed, cautious, legally sanitized. People begin trusting the neighbor who speaks plainly over the leader who speaks safely. Information at this moment is poison disguised as clarity. Phase 3 forms in pockets, not everywhere at once. Prepared households shut curtains, inventory supplies, and create routines that preserve sanity. Unprepared households begin moving, searching for functioning ATMs, open stores, relatives with space. Traffic becomes a slow migration without a destination. The cities don't explode. They thin, like blood draining from a wound. A new class division appears overnight, sharper than income. It is not rich versus poor. It is liquid versus illiquid. Those with cash, fuel, water, and community become stable nodes. Those with only digital balances become ghosts of a system that no longer answers. The phrase, "my money is in the bank," becomes a tragic joke. Hospitals switch to generator power and triage reality. Non-critical surgeries are cancelled, then critical ones, as supply deliveries miss windows. Oxygen deliveries become the bottleneck, not doctors. Pharmaceutical inventories shrink, and pharmacists begin counting pills like ammunition. A nurse writes dosage schedules on paper because the network is unreliable. In the geopolitical layer, the world stops pretending economics is separate from force. A Security Council convenes in a secure room that smells of carpet glue and stale air. Satellites confirm no missiles launched, yet DEFCON levels shift anyway. Cyber commands go to heightened posture, watching for opportunistic strikes. A currency accord has turned the planet into a alliances strain under invisible pressure. One bloc accuses another of weaponizing reserves, of forcing appreciation, of strangling exports deliberately. A rival denies it with perfect diplomatic language while moving capital controls into place overnight. Smaller nations plead for swap lines like refugees asking for passage. The world's reserve currency stops feeling like a privilege and starts feeling like a trap. In one capital, riot police deploy not to fight ideology, but to protect the central bank's physical building. Protesters chant for cash withdrawals, for accountabilities, for someone to blame. The bank's marble steps become a stage for raw helplessness. Officers hold shields that reflect angry faces back at themselves. The state protects the symbol because the symbol still holds power. In another capital, a leader's convoy moves with headlights off through a service tunnel. They are not hiding from attackers. They are hiding from cameras. The leader knows deal is logic. Force the rival into a currency squeeze. Trigger domestic stimulus. Inflate bubbles. Then watch the hangover. They also know the risk. Markets are larger now, faster now, less obedient. You can start the avalanche. You cannot choose where it stops. Supply chains reroute like nervous animals. Factories pause because inputs don't arrive. Workers get sent home early with vague promises. In industrial towns, bars fill at noon, and the laughter sounds defensive. A forklift sits idle in a warehouse because a single sensor part is stuck at a port unpaid. Globalization is revealed as a single machine with thousands of bolts, and one bolt has cracked. Food becomes the first political currency. Governments announce temporary purchase limits framed as anti-hoarding measures. The public hears rationing without the word being spoken. Farmers can't get diesel reliably, so harvest schedules slip. Refrigerated logistics fail in patches, turning abundance into rot. People learn that famine can exist inside a supermarket if the trucks stop. In the suburbs, homeowners form informal patrols, not because crime has exploded, but because rumor has. They walk with flashlights, radios, and a shared anxiety that needs a job. A teenager posts a video of a looted convenience store, and it spreads like wildfire. The next night, 3 stores close preemptively. Fear makes itself true. Fuel rationing arrives quietly, with bureaucracy's soft voice. Digital coupons fail, so paper cheats appear, stamped and signed like wartime artifacts. Lines form at dawn. People bring lawn chairs and thermoses, pretending it's normal. A man trades half his tank for a pack of batteries. Nobody loves because everyone understands the math. The military stays disciplined, but it can't ignore logistics. Bases inventory jet fuel, spare parts, and food stocks. Commanders brief troops on civil support missions, power restoration escorts, and port security. Soldiers rehearse crowd control with a seriousness that chills the observers. The line between external defense and internal stability blurs, not by decree, but by necessity. The invisible threat isn't radiation this time. It is financial fallout, drifting across borders, settling in bank balance sheets, poisoning credit. A small bank fails in one country, and a larger bank refuses to lend in another. Interbank trust becomes the scarce resource that everything depends on. When trust collapses, interest rates become meaningless because no one wants the paper. Currency notes become talismans. People touch them, count them, hide them in jars and books. Counterfeits surge because desperation breeds artisans. Shops test bills with markers, then with UV lights, then with suspicion alone. A cashier holds a note up to a dim bulb, searching for a watermark like it's an omen. The economy becomes tactile, and therefore crueler. In high-rise offices, executives hold crisis meetings that feel like funerals. They discuss staged layoffs and liquidity preservation and asset sales. The words are sterile, but the outcome is human. The building's elevators run on backup power, and each ride feels like descending deeper. One person asks whether this ends. Nobody answers honestly. Outside, weather keeps happening indifferent. A heat wave hits a city already running on partial power, and apartments become ovens. Water pressure drops as pumping stations cycle. People carry buckets up stairwells, breathing hard, sweating, cursing softly. Modern life reveals its hidden machinery, and that machinery is tired. The Accord's architects expected leverage, not contagion. They expected a rival to blink, to accept appreciation, to absorb pain quietly. Instead, the rival freezes capital outflows and dumps assets with calculated brutality. Markets interpret every move as escalation. Every currency becomes a weapon, every bond a hostage. The deal stops being a tool and becomes a fuse. A cyber front opens because it always does. Power utilities report anomalous commands in scatalogs. Water treatment plants, sea valves, toggling without human input. Nothing catastrophic yet. But the message is clear. Systems are inside each other now. Engineers isolate networks, reverting to manual controls, praying nobody made a physical tripwire. The public hears precautionary shutdowns and feels the floor tilt. Air travel shrinks into a privilege for government and the very rich. Airlines can't hedge fuel, can't price tickets, can't guarantee staffing. Airports become echoing caverns of cancelled screens. Families sleep on floors beneath dead charging stations. A child asks why the planes aren't flying, and the parent says because of computers, which is half true and fully frightening. The new normal settles like dust. People adapt faster than they believe they can. Neighborhoods set up water sharing, cookouts for thawing freezers, rotating childcare. Some communities become strong because crisis gives them purpose. Others fracture because crisis strips away stories and leaves only hunger. Both outcomes feel inevitable while they happen. Governments attempt order through structure. Curfews appear, first as recommendations, then as enforcement. Roadblocks regulate fuel and deter opportunistic theft. Emergency broadcasts instruct citizens to keep 2 weeks of food, like that advice hasn't arrived decades late. The state's voice becomes constant and therefore easier to ignore. People listen more to the behavior of crowds. On the geopolitical stage, a summit happens behind closed doors. Leaders sit around a table, faces lit by screens showing exchange rates like vital signs. One leader demands rollback, another demands concessions, another demands security guarantees tied to currency corridors. The words Article 5 get mentioned in a financial context, and everyone feels nausea. A misstep here doesn't just crash a market, it misfires a deterrent. A naval incident occurs in contested waters, not because someone wants war, but because navigation and communication degrade. A destroyer's supply schedule is disrupted, and it takes a risk to refuel at a vulnerable time. A drone shadows it too closely. A warning flare is misread as escalation. Diplomats scramble, but diplomats now move at human speed, and markets move at machine speed. In cities, this soundscape changes permanently. Fewer engines, more footsteps. Fewer advertisements, more shouted instructions. Generators thump in back alleys, guarded like treasure. Somewhere, a gunshot cracks, and people freeze, listening for a second. The silence afterward feels heavier than the noise. Resolution doesn't arrive as victory, it arrives as exhaustion. A partial settlement network comes back online with strict limits and harsh prioritization. Governments choose who gets liquidity and who doesn't, and every choice creates enemies. A new set of exchange rates stabilizes, but the stability feels like a scar, not healing. The world learns that orderly is just a word. The lingering truth is simple and humiliating. Modern life is an agreement held together by electricity, credit, and belief. The moment belief becomes negotiable, everything becomes barter, bordos, and bruisers. The secret deal doesn't need to destroy a country with intent. It only needs to push one domino and let human panic finish the engineering.